Welcome to Paranormal Nightfall.
The Nevada desert stretched infinitely, an endless sea of sandy waves and sagebrush, occasionally interrupted by rugged mountains. The sun's golden fingers touched the horizon, casting a deep orange hue across the vast expanse. Amidst this tranquil solitude, Lisa pitched her tent in a spot that she could relish the calm of her surroundings. She needed this break, away from the hustle of city life and her demanding job. Away from all the pressures of being a single parent to Carly, her 5-year-old daughter who was staying with her grandmother. This was Lisa's time to recharge, and she couldn't have chosen a better spot. As dusk settled, the first stars appeared, forming constellations that had fascinated humanity for eons. Lisa lay back on a mat, watching the night sky, losing herself in its beauty. The sound of a gentle breeze was the only sound that accompanied the tranquil desert night. But tranquility was short-lived. Out of nowhere, Lisa noticed a strange light, unlike any airplane she'd ever seen. A glowing object changing colors from red to blue to yellow. It zipped and zigzagged, hovered momentarily, then shot off in different directions at speeds that made Lisa's heart race. The display lasted barely a few minutes, and then, as suddenly as it appeared, the lights vanished, leaving behind only the static stars. Lisa sat up, her heart pounding in her chest. She scanned the desert, half expecting to see something, anything, that would explain the phenomenon. But all was silent. Grabbing her phone, she switched on the camera, hoping the lights would return, but they didn't. She tried searching the internet for any similar occurrences in the area, but found her phone had no signal. She assumed that it must have been military jets, recalling the proximity of Area 51. Perhaps some sort of test flight. But deep inside, a voice whispered that it wasn't any jets she knew of. The desert, so calming just moments ago, now seemed vast and ominous. As Lisa prepared to sleep, she decided she'd pack up early in the morning and maybe head closer to civilization. However, before she could drift into slumber, a distant boom echoed across the desert, jolting her awake. The ground beneath her rumbled, and for a moment, Lisa thought of an earthquake. But then she realized the source of the sound was coming from where she'd seen the lights. Hard in her throat, she grabbed a flashlight and decided to investigate. The desert was colder now, and as Lisa moved in the direction of the sound, her beam of light danced on the shrubs and rocks. After walking for what felt like hours, but was probably just a few minutes, she found herself atop a small rise. Below, a glow emanated from behind another series of dunes. Taking a deep breath, Lisa descended towards the glow. As she neared, the sight before her was unlike anything she'd ever seen or imagined. And it was then that Lisa knew, those were not military jets she saw in the sky. Not by a long shot. The dunes seemed to cradle the scene before her, partially burying the implications of what lay at the heart of the glow. It was a craft, unlike any Lisa had ever seen, sleek, silver, and half submerged in the sand, as though the desert itself was trying to claim it. The glow emanated from what seemed to be damaged sections of the ship, illuminating the surroundings with an eerie, otherworldly light. Heart racing, Lisa approached the vessel cautiously. Its smooth surface bore no recognizable markings, but every now and then, it would ripple and shimmer as though it was not entirely solid. She reached out a tentative hand to touch it but jerked back instinctively when a sudden static charge danced around her fingers. Surrounding the crash site, in the soft sand, were footprints, but they weren't human. They were three-toed, elongated, with a peculiar web-like structure between each toe. A trail of these footprints led away from the ship, toward the west. The realization hit Lisa like a ton of bricks. Not only had the craft crashed, but something had survived the crash and was now out there in the desert. Her first instinct was to flee, to get back to her campsite and drive away as fast as she could. But curiosity, that ever-present human trait, held her back. The world had to know about this, she thought. This was bigger than her fear, bigger than any single person. After taking several pictures with her phone, Lisa's curiosity got the better of her and she decided to peek inside the vessel. There was an opening on the side, possibly where the crew exited. Inside, she could see an array of lights and what appeared to be controls. But it was the center of the cockpit that caught her attention. There, suspended in midair, was a holographic projection. It flickered and rotated slowly, depicting Earth with several red dots marked across the continents. Lisa, with her limited understanding of what she was seeing, could only make a wild guess. Were these landing sites? Were there more of these crafts on Earth? And if so, what was their purpose? A sudden noise snapped Lisa from her thoughts. A low hum, steadily growing louder. Panic rose within her as she realized the implications. Someone, or something, was coming back to the ship. Without a second thought, Lisa bolted from the site, her flashlight's beam dancing erratically ahead of her. The hum grew louder, now accompanied by a strange, high-pitched whirring sound. She dared not look back, but the increasing glow at her back indicated that she was being pursued. In her panic, Lisa tripped over a rock, the impact knocking the wind out of her. As she tried to catch her breath and get up, a shadow loomed over her, blocking out the desert stars. She turned, her heart thumping loudly in her ears, and was met with an indescribable sight. The creature stood at least 7 feet tall, with gray, leathery skin. Its eyes, large and almond-shaped, glowed a soft amber, and it stared at her with an intensity that Lisa found both terrifying and mesmerizing. The rest of its features were just as alien: no nose, just small slits, and a thin, lipless mouth. Frozen in fear, Lisa could only watch as the creature tilted its head, as though studying her. But before anything more could happen, a blinding light flooded the area, followed by the deafening roar of helicopter blades. The military had arrived. The creature ran back into the craft. Lisa, still breathless and trembling from her recent encounter, found herself suddenly surrounded by a team of military personnel. The swift operation, their faces concealed behind visors, and the glaring lights from the helicopters overhead, made the desert feel like a war zone. "Move away from the craft," one of the soldiers shouted, aiming his weapon at her. A soldier, equipped with a device Lisa couldn't recognize, pointed it at her. The device emitted a low-frequency hum, and she winced as it sent waves of nausea through her. "Get her out of here," the soldier barked. Before Lisa could react, 2 soldiers grabbed her arms and led her forcefully to one of the waiting helicopters. With soldiers on either side of her, they took off. She saw more soldiers approaching the craft, weapons aimed as the scene disappeared into the night. Lisa's heart pounded and yelled for them to let her go. The soldier in front of her simply nodded, acknowledging he'd heard her, but said nothing in return. It was apparent that he was under strict orders. She felt helpless. The helicopter landed at a makeshift military base, hidden among the sand dunes. In the distance, she could see the portable lights set up by the military illuminating the sky. Lisa was quickly ushered into a tent. Inside, screens and monitors displayed live feeds of the crash site. A stern-looking man in a dark suit, hat, and sunglasses approached Lisa. He told her in a monotone voice that they'd been monitoring the situation since they first picked up the unknown craft entering Earth's atmosphere. He then told her, reading from an iPad, that they knew everything about her. And they did. Name. Address. Daughter's name. Where she worked. Everything. Lisa recounted her experience. But as she spoke of the creature and going into the craft, the man told her she should have stayed at her campsite and left this to the professionals. Lisa felt a knot in her stomach. She was in trouble. Suddenly, a loud siren blared throughout the camp. Everyone rushed outside, looking up at the night sky, which was now illuminated with a brilliant light. An enormous mothership, dwarfing the earlier craft, hovered above where the craft had landed. The temporary lights suddenly went dark, and without warning, a beam of light shot down, encapsulating the crashed ship, and, in mere moments, it was gone, lifted into the larger vessel. The ship lingered for a moment longer, casting an almost palpable tension across the camp. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it shot upwards, disappearing into the stars. The desert was silent once more, the only remnants of the night's events being the disturbed sands and the whirl of emotions in Lisa's heart. Little did she know, her ordeal was far from over. As the dust settled and the colossal mothership vanished into the night, a tense silence gripped the makeshift military base. Soldiers and officers alike stood in stunned disbelief, eyes fixed on the now empty patch of desert that had, moments ago, been the site of an otherworldly encounter. The man, who had seemed so composed and in control earlier, now seemed ruffled. He immediately ordered the soldiers to gather all the data and recordings. He turned to Lisa, his expression unreadable, and told her to come with him. Lisa was escorted to an armored truck, and they sped away from the base, heading towards a secured military facility nestled against the backdrop of rugged Nevada mountains. She could tell by the increasing security measures, guards, watchtowers, barbed wire, that this was no ordinary installation. Once inside, she was led to an interrogation room. Bright lights shone down on a single metal table, with chairs on either side. A large two-way mirror occupied one wall. As she took a seat, she wondered who might be watching from the other side. The man started the interrogation, his tone direct, and told her to repeat everything she had told him before. From the beginning. Lisa recounted her experience, again leaving out no detail. As she spoke, she noticed another man enter the room in a military uniform. His face was stoic, devoid of any emotion. He introduced himself as General Hale. He slid a series of photos across the table to Lisa. They showed various scenes of her exploration of the crashed craft, her interaction with the creature. The general leaned in closer, his icy blue eyes locking onto hers. He told her they'd been tracking the visitors for some time, and this was the closet they had come to, capturing a craft. General Hale silently sat across from Lisa. "Are you going to kill me?" she asked. "Your story is intriguing, but it poses a significant risk to our national security. We have two choices. Choice 1 is that we take you to a black site where you will remain for the rest of your life." Lisa swallowed hard. All she could think about was not seeing her daughter. "What's choice 2?" she asked. The general folded his hands and slid a document to her. Placing a pen on top, he said, "You signed this non-disclosure form. You don't talk about this encounter to anyone. And I mean anyone." General Hale leaned forward, his face devoid of emotion. "No, Miss Sanders. We're not monsters. But understand this, the world isn't ready for the truth. Panic, chaos, societal breakdown, these are the consequences of such revelations. Our job is to ensure stability. You'll be released," he continued, "but with conditions. You'll sign this non-disclosure agreement, agreeing never to speak of this event or your findings. You'll be monitored, and any breach will have dire consequences. For you. For your mother. For your daughter, Carly. You will all be taken to a black site. And believe me, a black site is no place for a child. Do you understand?" Lisa felt the weight of their threats pressing down on her. Tears welled up in her eyes as she thought of Carly, her innocent laughter, her joyous spirit. The thought of anything happening to her was unbearable. With a trembling hand, Lisa signed the agreement. She was then escorted out of the facility and left at her campsite. As she looked around, the desolation of the Nevada desert mirrored the emptiness she felt inside. Picking up her scattered belongings, Lisa made her way back to her car. She started the ignition and began the long drive home, the desert landscape blurring past her. The promise of the alien visitor, the threat of the government, the weight of secrecy, it all seemed like a distant dream. But the ever-watchful eyes that she knew would follow her were constant reminders of the reality she now lived in. Upon reaching home, she embraced Carly and her mother, tears streaming down her face. She knew she could never share the horrors she had witnessed or the threats she had endured. But in the safety of her home, with her family by her side, Lisa found solace. The truth was out there, but some truths were too dangerous to be told.
If you like this story, press like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, or else.